So next up, let's talk about Spring caches with protocol buffers. Protocol buffers, or protobufs, are a language and platform-neutral mechanism for serializing structured data. This next talk focuses on how Infispan uses protobuf encoding to marshal and store data in context of caching for Spring applications. Let's go ahead and join Katya Aresti, software engineer at Red Hat, to talk us through it.
So Spring caches with protocol buffers. I'm super happy to be here with all of you in this Spring One from Paris. It's 7:30 here, and I'm Katya Aresti. I'm senior. I think this is not. Oops. I'm a senior software engineer from Red Hat. Sorry, I have just a question. Do we see here do we see only my presentation, or do we see myself here? Sorry, do we see well my presentation? I hope we are. Anyway, I'm a senior software engineer working at Red Hat in the Infinispan team, and I'm a Java champion since 2019. Well, I'm tweeting sometimes from time to time on Caresti, so just feel free to join me there. So Spring caches. Spring caches. So the Spring framework proposes a Spring cache abstraction from the very beginning, because most applications need caching at a point for offloading data from the database, performing fast calculations, and putting them in a cache, or avoiding latency and having better performance in applications. And so Spring caches provide this cache abstraction where we can plug correctly any of different cache providers that can be embedded caches like Caffeine, that it's a local cache, or ESCache, or different JCache implementations. And we do support Infinispan for a long time as well with the Spring caches. So a little word about Infinispan. Infinispan, we are in version 12.1.7 right now, and the development version is the version 13. We are 100% open source in memory distributed data. Essentially, we build our functionalities on top of distributed caches, and we have a major version every year. So one of the first key features is the interoperability. We can use Infinispan with Spring Boot and with Java applications and Java applications in general, but not only, we can work with Node.js or with C# as well. We propose, we have a resilient and fault-tolerant data through different consistency levels and availability strategies. We can perform ACID transactions as well in memory on top of the distributed caches, clustering processing of the data, and querying over the values of the caches. So even if we can use embedded mode in Infinispan, which means that we will get every instance, for example, of an Spring Boot application will embed in an Infinispan and create a distributed cache where the data will be distributed across many nodes. Since this kind of use cases lead to stateful applications where scaling up and down and deployments in the cloud are much trickier, the best is to focus now on the Infinispan client server use case, where we will deploy our applications, can be a Node.js application, a Java application with a Spring Boot, a C#, and from one side using an Infinispan client. And from another side, we will have the Infinispan server cluster on Kubernetes deployed with the Infinispan operator as well. And using the REST API or hot rod, which is the binary protocol, the one used by the clients, we will interact with Infinispan. This allows perfectly to get the separation between a scaling up and down CPU and the scaling up and down memory. So the Spring Cache starter and the implementation of a Spring Boot with Infinispan for now supports embedded caches. If you want to use the client server mode, you should use the Infinispan Spring Boot starter. This starter was developed some years ago with the help of the Spring Boot team, and it's maintained by Infinispan. So we're focusing again on the client server mode. We have our application and Spring Boot application, and we want to use caching with Infinispan as a caching provider. In our Spring Boot application, we need to tell the Spring Boot application how we want to serialize the data and how we want to marshal and unmarshal the data that will be stored in Infinispan. For that, we may want to use Java serialization and use Java marshaller or string marshalling or protostring marshaller, and I will explain what this is in a minute. From another side, the caches are in the server, and the server caches are going to define the configuration we want for the format, the encoding and the format on how we want to store the data. So it can be with Java marshalling as well, with text, JSON, XML, or Protobuf. And today, for example, all the query features mostly work. You can do some of the things with the Java marshalling, but since Java marshalling has been an endless source of vulnerabilities in the Java ecosystem for a long time. It was designed many years ago, and today there are other serialization formats that are better. So we really focused on moving into Protobuf as the serialization format that will be the best suited for having all the features of Infinispan fully supported. So this is what we recommend today. Until version 11, Spring caches weren't fully supported with Protobuf. For example, null values weren't supported with Spring Boot and Infinispan caches with Protobuf encoding. And the Spring session wasn't Spring Session abstraction is also using Infinispan caches to store session data, and this wasn't neither supported with Protobuf. Since version 12 of Infinispan, we can use encoding encoded caches with Protobuf and use the protostream marshaller, which is the marshaller that it's part of the protostream library, that it's part of Infinispan, and it's our integration with Protobuf. So the protostream API allows us to just using annotations like protofactory or protofill here on the slide to annotate our POJOs and tell Infinispan how to marshal and unmarshal Protobuf from our POJOs. And it will also, the protostream library, create the proto schema, and the proto schema is needed also for protostream. Protostream will use this schema to know how to transform the data, marshal and unmarshal the data from Java to Protobuf, but it also, this schema is used by the server to know how to marshal and unmarshal data also on the server side. So the only thing the server needs to know to be able to correctly perform all the features is the knowledge of this proto schema. So the best thing now for me is really to show you, instead of show you the slides or more theory, to show you a little example I developed where I'm running an Infinispan in a cluster of one single node in local. So I'm not going to the best place in the world on this presentation. I will stay in Paris, which is a nice place in the world as well. And I have my Spring Boot application that it's connecting to Infinispan in a Protobuf that is holding Protobuf serialized data. And I will show you how this integration is really great and really useful beyond just caching. Because I will also show you how running another cluster also in my local, which will be in another site, New York, will connect and create data, configure a backup in the London site. We've done this in production many times, so having different data centers, different deployments, and different cloud providers connecting each other and doing backup from the data, which is really great because we don't want to lose data sometimes, right? So I'm just going to run, coming here to my first. So I'm running here with Docker Compose 2 different sites. This is the Infinispan web console. I'm just going to close this a little. So here is the London site, which is completely empty. And I have a single node running on this cluster that is perfect. We can see some statistics of this cluster here. Nothing has happened yet. And I do have another cluster running here, which is New York. It's another with Docker Compose again. Together, it's another site. So they are connected through cross-site replication, London, New York. Now I'm going to focus only on the New York, on the London site in my Paris local host. So here is my customer application. It's a very simple application where here, instead of using the Spring Cache starter, I'm using the Infinispan Spring Boot starter remote because we do support embedded and remote client server mode on this starter. And to connect to a simple Infinispan, this is a workaround for Docker for Macs. You can ignore because my Infinispan is not authenticated or anything. So I just need to tell localhost and port 11222 to be able to connect with my Infinispan hot rod client. So I'm just going to run here my application. And since it's starting, I will show you here. I just have, it's a really very, very simple application that has a REST controller with a get by ID here and a customer that I want to retrieve. And I will inject the customer repository. To use caching in a Spring Boot application, we will enable caching with an annotation over here. So when I go to define by ID, I want to cache, put in the cache this method. I use the cacheable annotation. So the first time this method will be executed if the key is not found in Infinispan, but the successive calls of this method will be ignored and the value will be retrieved for Infinispan. And I'm configuring here the customer cache. So this is the same thing even if you're using Java Marsaling or Protobuf, but we want to use Protobuf. So the first thing is that the cache I want to use, I need to define an encoding to tell him that the encoding of the cache is protostream. And I'm also using indexing here because I want to perform some search. And if you see here, I want to use an index on some values called spring1.customer, which is here. Spring customer is a Java class that doesn't implement serializable because it's not necessary since it's going to be serialized with Protobuf, with ProtoStream in Protobuf value. And using these annotations of protofactory and protofield, the proto schema has been created. I have another meta annotations here that relate to indexing, and I will show you that after in a minute what this is for. I have also an enumeration of the city because the customer I'm setting a city, so I can tag those to be marshaled with proto and value annotation. And then I will create with an interface extending generated schema where I will say Spring1 is the package and these are the included classes. With all this, ProtoStream has created an schema. So I'm just going to try the HTTP localhost 8080 customers/1 just to check what it does. This has taken me the Sarah Talbot 1, and I'm gonna check what happened in Infinispan. So a cache has been created automatically for me, and I have an schema here as well. So this proto schema has been created, and I uploaded this schema from my Spring Boot application. And this has been done with the Infinispan ProtoStream library, as you see here, with some comments for metadata for the indexing. And here I have the customer cache where I can convert to JSON my object without any trouble. So the configuration of the cache, it's ProtoStream, and here I have some metrics as well. I'm just gonna hit the cache a little here with, so this is going to create more data. And I'm gonna just explain how this cache was created as well with the Infinispan Spring Boot starter. In the configuration here, I can say with the remote API over here, get the XML configuration, and this cache will be created on first access if it doesn't exist. This is important since by default, the marshaller used by a Spring Boot application is the Java marshaller. So if we want to use Protobuf, we need to tell that this cache is using ProtoStream instead. This is for backwards compatibility. And this is for the schema. We need to tell also how the schema generated schema has to be worked. This here, and also the schema upload over here, it's a little code to upload the schema that has been generated. This is something we will add with a property to be done automatically for yourself in the next version of the Spring Boot starter. But now I'm using version 12. This will be in version 13. So I'm just showing some small usability API stuff that we are working on that will be completely transparent for you. Don't need to do it yourself if you don't want to do that yourself with an API. So now if I come back here to I have 40 entries, and this cache is it's an indexed, which means that I can perform full text queries. So I will show you how, thanks to the the Protobuf integration, we can perform queries like this. This is, as I said, a JavaScript application. It's not a Java application. And we can get just order by age. So we see we have some customers that have 109 years old. And yeah, they are triggered like this. We can sort it like that. We can also run this query over here. Oops, obviously I have an issue on my so here. So okay, I don't know why this is the demo effect. I've run this like a million times. I don't know why it's not working now. I'm so disappointed. Wait, okay, now it's working. Sorry, something happened on my console. So here we have only the 7 entries, the 7 values with the age 35 to 50. Over here, 7, and I can run as well, I hope. this query, yeah, that I haven't any value here. This was a good result, because I don't have any customer whose name is Len, but I can try to find one similar. So I have here Ben Valentin. So this is what I saw. This is the how query works. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous now. So I'm just going to show you how the New York cross-site replication might work over here. So first I'm going to show you how here, if I try to find the it doesn't exist. The customer 1000 doesn't exist. I have another customer here. 1000 doesn't exist, and it's, since I said I want to cache everything, it has been cached. The null value has been it's on the cache as well. So we see here that the type of the key 1000 is null value. So now what I'm going to try here is to just replace that null value over here. So I don't need to use, as I said, I don't need to use the Java API or anything to create the proto schema. I can use the REST API, so the console this way. And this is how I'm going to do it here in the New York proto schema. So first I created the schema here as well. And now I'm going to create a cache that it's called customers as well. And I will create this cache with this configuration here. Where the Marshallin is ProtoStream as well, and the backup cache is in London. So I create this, and there is nothing here. And now I'm gonna add an entry with key 1000, and I'm gonna get a JSON over here to place it this way. So it's a type underscore type Spring One customer, and I'm gonna change the name and here as well the ID. And so if I add this, now here in London, I should be seeing, yeah, Spring One customer 1000. The copy has been done from New York to the London site. And now I don't have a null value anymore. So if I go here to my Spring Boot application that it's using the REST API over here that I showed you just at the beginning, now we have Spring One New York. So I'm done with the demo part. So that's all I have for today. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this presentation where at the beginning I didn't know if you were seeing stuff as it should be seen. I was a bit a bit nervous. And I have some links here of the Infinispan documentation. We've built a very nice demo as well with the Infinispan and with a competitor. But there is a very nice video where you can do the same thing with Spring Boot and Infinispan. We had a global ranking of players using Infinispan and querying and sorting. We were able to have 3 different clusters deployed and all the data getting copied around and having a global ranking of players in an online game we developed. So that's something really cool that can be done with Spring Boot caches and Infinispan as well. So going beyond the use case of just getting behind your cache abstraction. You can also imagine that maybe you are going to use maybe not a Spring Boot, but not JS for another use case, and you need to grab some data. So the integration with Protobuf is really good and really cool. So that's all for me. We can go to the Q&A. I think I finished on time.
Hey, thanks, Katia. That talk was great. This is your domain, and I loved your confidence. It was so great to have you on. And for our audience, if you have more questions about Infispan or Protobuf or Spring Caches, please follow Katia to the postdoc Zoom that will be up shortly. A reminder that Q&A will continue on Slack for a bit later too. All right, with that, that's actually the end of my shift as an MC. Your next talk starts at 2:05 p.m. Eastern, and you'll meet my colleague Jimmy Chunga, who will be the MC for the next set of talks. Enjoy the rest of Spring One. We're so glad you came. This is Aditya, over and out.